There's this perception that I hate Hakeem Olajuwon, or I don't like Hakeem Olajuwon. That bothers me a lot. I don't talk about it, but it bothers me. The only time that I ever say anything negative about Hakeem is when and it's not personal. It's when I'm trying to argue my point as to why I think Jordan was greater. But that's not me saying that Hakeem Olajuwon. I mean, listen to what I'm saying. That's like me saying, um, Bill Gates is richer than Donald Trump. But that's not me. By me saying that, is that me saying that Donald Trump is poor? Of course not. He's ridiculously wealthy, beyond most of our wildest expectations and dreams. But just comparatively against Bill Gates, he's not as wealthy. That's all I'm saying. But some people disagree with the Jordan Olajuwon thing, and that's fine. Whatever. But my thing is this: for at least a 2-year span, possibly longer, but at least for a 2-year span, Hakeem Olajuwon ruled basketball. He was the best basketball player on the planet. When Michael Jordan announced his retirement in October of 1993, there were so many different candidates for who was going to become that guy. Okay, you had Darryl Robinson in San Antonio. You had young Shaquille O'Neal in Orlando. Some people wondered whether Scottie Pippen would emerge as the best player in the NBA. Would Scottie Pippen be able to raise his game up to the level of Michael Jordan? Those were some of the main guys that come. Some people thought, hey, Patrick Ewing, Michael Jordan's now gone. This is your year. You guys won 60 ball games last year. You guys had a 2-0 lead against Chicago. Okay, we'll forgive you that you guys blew 4 consecutive games, but there was Michael Jordan. But he's not there anymore. Patrick Ewing, you take it. You become the best player in the NBA. Another thing, too, about the mid-1990s was this was when, with Michael gone, if you were a fan of the center position, the big man, the traditional big man, this is before European-style big men were proliferated throughout the league. This was the basketball that you would love, okay? Hard-nosed, defensive-minded, half-court set basketball, okay? And the player that would emerge as the best basketball player on the planet was Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. Hakeem was hungry in 93-94. He came into the NBA the first overall pick, ahead of even the great Michael Jordan. And individually, he had been brilliant, but he had lacked that postseason success as far as championships is concerned. His level of play had been stellar, but in the postseason, he had not been able to do it. And in a couple of years, he didn't even. The Houston Rockets didn't even qualify for the playoffs. And he was frustrated. Prior to the 92-93 campaign, Hakeem Olajuwon was almost traded. He was almost traded because he wanted management to build a team around him that was championship caliber. And now, while Hakeem Olajuwon never played with another superstar caliber player, he did play with all-star or potential all-star level players on his team. You had a Sam Cassell who will ultimately become a all-star level player in his career. You had Robert Horry. People forget the young Robert Horry, who was a guy who would slash the basket and dunk and block shots. And most people kind of remember the older Robert Horry, who kind of coasted during the regular season and hung back and shot three-pointers all day. That did extend his career a lot. Kenny Smith, who believes in his own mind he's the greatest point guard of all time. He's not the greatest point guard of all time. He tends to over-exaggerate his importance, but he was a solid point guard especially in his career with the Sacramento Kings. But when he was with the Houston Rockets, he was a solid point guard. Um, Vernon Maxwell, tempestuous, temperamental, uh, erratic, both in temperament and his game at times, especially the offensive end. But he was a solid marksman from deep, and he was a great defensive player. Otis Thorpe, who had been an all-star uh, the year prior, but the straw that stirred the drink was Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. No one disputes that. I also remember Tracy Murray and Matt Bullard on those teams too. They had a lot of great three-point shooters on that club. And you can make the argument that they were the first championship team to kind of really rely on that three-point shot to that extent. You think about it. Chicago had three-point shooters, but Houston really relied on the three-point shot a lot. But anyway, during the regular season, the Houston Rockets roared through the regular season. They won the first 15 games. They wound up winning a franchise record 58 games, and they just roared through the playoffs. And I don't want to say they roared through the playoffs because they had their missteps here or there against Phoenix, but ultimately they were able to make it to the NBA Finals. And in the finals, Hakeem Olajuwon was matched up against Patrick Ewing. Houston against Georgetown. This was going to be a series that determined supremacy at the center position. Patrick Ewing wanted validation for why the New York Knicks selected him in '85. Hakeem Olajuwon wanted redemption in so many different ways. This is the same guy who, when he was with Houston in 1983, I believe it was, they lost to North Carolina State at the buzzer. And this was a team that was highly favored against Houston at Fox Slamma Jamma with Clyde Drexler. They were highly favored against North Carolina State, and they blew it. He knew that a championship was vital for his legacy. Hey, he never won a championship. He still have been a Hall of Famer, no doubt about it, but he would never be seen as anything more than a fractionally top 20 player had he not won a title. And he knew that. And during the 1994 NBA Finals, a finals noted for a couple of things. The first series, I believe, that no team reached 100 points, and also was infamously known for being interrupted during one game by a Bronco chase where the O.J. Simpson case just blew wide open. And I'm jogging the memories of some people listening to this video right now. And you can make the argument that the New York Knicks were the better overall team. You can make the argument that despite the horrid shooting of Patrick Ewing and John Starks, the Knicks were still able to take that series to 7 games. As a matter of fact, let me rephrase something about John Starks. John Starks' shooting numbers were horrid only because of Game 7. Prior to Game 7, John Starks was shooting a respectable 42% from the floor, which is about what he shot for his career, which I think is something like 41.7% or something like that. Might be a little off with the percentage, fractional percentage. But John Starks was having a great series up until Game 7, which is why Pat Riley stuck with him in Game 7. And it's also why he chose John Starks to take the potential series and championship winning shot at the end of Game 6. But who was the guy who deflected that shot and saved the day for Houston? None other than Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. And in Game 7, with help from a little help from his friends, Hakeem Olajuwon exercised his demons, and the city of Houston won their first NBA championship. In 94-95, Houston didn't start off quite as as solid. I believe Hakeem Olajuwon missed something like 10 games due to injury that year. The team just didn't look the same, and there was a lot of discontent. A lot of it had to do actually with Vernon Maxwell, and Vernon Maxwell was eventually let go. The offense didn't look quite the same. There was a trade made for Clyde Drexler, Hakeem Olajuwon's former teammate, and the team was rejuvenated. They were a 6 seed, but they didn't play like it in the postseason. And Hakeem Olajuwon would make the 1995 playoffs his own personal playground. Hakeem Olajuwon, throughout the years, had perfected his postgame. Hakeem Olajuwon was known for being a great rebounder. He led the NBA rebounding a couple of years. He led the NBA in block shots a couple of years. He was a prolific shot blocker. He was a very good, if not downright great rebounder. Okay, he was an excellent defensive player. In 93-94, he became the first man ever to win the league MVP award, the Defensive Player of the Year award, and the NBA Finals MVP award. And he took over the mantle as the best player on the planet. In 1994-95, he was silently, because he didn't make it known. He wasn't one of these guys who went out in the public and say how he felt about certain things, but silently, he was pissed off that David Robinson had won MVP. David Robinson was pushed by some and seen by some as the guy who would one day overtake Hakeem Olajuwon's mantle as the best center in the NBA. And Hakeem Olajuwon seethed behind that. Seethed. And he would get his revenge. But if you look at the 95 postseason, you look what Houston did. It's remarkable. They were the 6th seed, but they would, in the first round, defeat the Utah Jazz, which comprised of Karl Malone and the great John Stockton. After that, they would get a rematch of the Phoenix Suns, who they dispatched of the year prior. The year prior, the Phoenix Suns were the defending Western Conference champions. In 95, Phoenix was up 3-1. Charles Barkley guaranteed that his team will not blow a 3-1 lead. And whatever that was, whatever it may be, that jinxed them. They lost 3 consecutive ball games. The last shot, the series-winning shot of Mario Elliott 3, and a kiss to the bench, the Phoenix Suns bench. But the Western Conference Finals would be Hakeem Olajuwon's redemption. He would display all of the post moves, including the infamous dream shake on David Robinson, and absolutely demoralized David Robinson. Hakeem Olajuwon, in my opinion, is one of the 2 greatest post players ever. The only other guy in the conversation, in my opinion at least, is Kevin McHale. Kevin McHale and Hakeem Olajuwon are the greatest post players of all time. Okay. But Hakeem Olajuwon so thoroughly dismantled David Robinson in that Western Conference Finals, in my opinion, that David Robinson, though he still had a brilliant 95-96 season, he never recaptured the same luster, the same shine as he had that year prior. To prove my point, the fact is that David Robinson's a Hall of Famer. No one questions that. But he's never going to be looked at, despite the fact that he's won 2 championships. He's never been looked at as on the same level as Shaquille O'Neal and Hakeem Olajuwon. You see what I'm saying? Even though they both have the same number of championship rings too. He's not looked upon as the same because a lot of it has to do with Hakeem Olajuwon. Then you go to the NBA Finals, and they play the Orlando Magic, and it looks like the Orlando Magic are just going to beat this team. They're just a great overall unit, one of the great individual teams of all time. They're like the team of the future. They were young, they were hungry, you know what I mean? Uh, and they had, recently dispatched my favorite player who was making his comeback, Michael Jordan, making him look human. This team had young Shaquille O'Neal, young Anthony Hardaway, young Nick Anderson, young Dennis Scott, and veteran Horace Grant. They had a solid bench. Houston looked like their run, while magical, was going to come to an end. Then game one happens, and what everybody expected to happen, happened. Orlando was, pardon my expression, they were kicking Houston's ass. They were up 20 points early in the game. It looked like things were going to go the way people thought, maybe 4-1. Maybe if Houston's lucky, 4-2, but Orlando's going to win this series. But then Orlando chipped away little by little, little by little, little by little. If I say Orlando, I meant Houston. Houston chipped away little by little in the game, to the point where it was anybody's game late in the fourth. And Nick Anderson gave the Houston Rockets the greatest gift that they could ever dream for, missing 4 consecutive free throws. And I still remember Kenny Smith getting the basketball. Kenny Smith had made 6 3-pointers prior to this moment. I remember him getting the basketball, doing a juke move on Penny Hardaway, getting free, getting a good look. And I remember when he shot it, I knew it was good. Sometimes you can just look at a person's form and you know it's going to go. He shot it. I knew it was good. It went in. The game went to overtime. And I remember saying to myself, Orlando's going to lose this game. And Hakeem Olajuwon was the one who won the ball game for them. If I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but I'm trying to remember off of memory sometimes. I get criticized for this sometimes, but I just like to try to go off memory sometimes. If I remember correctly, Clyde Drexler tried to drive and get the game-winning layup, and that drew Shaquille O'Neal over, to help defensively. But this left Hakeem Olajuwon open. Clyde Drexler missed his attempt. The attempt careened off the basket, but Hakeem was able to tip it back in with just 0.1 seconds, maybe something like 0.1 seconds remaining. Houston stole game one. Totally took the win out of Orlando's sails. They won game two. After game two, where they withstand their fury from Orlando mentally gave up. Even though it was only 2-0 Houston, after 2-0, they gave up mentally. They just gave up the series. They physically played 2 more ball games, but they had given up. And I remember game 4 was capped by a 3-pointer by Hakeem Olajuwon. And I remember being so elated because I hated Orlando at the time because they had beaten my Bulls. But I was in awe of Hakeem Olajuwon, this tremendous player who could do it all. He could get in the passing lanes. He could steal the basketball. He'd be among the leaders in steals, which is highly unusual for a center. He was a guy who was just a rarity, and to think that he had come into basketball so relatively late. I think he was only 14 or 15 years old when he even picked up a basketball for the first time. He was a soccer player in Nigeria, and he was a little bit clumsy at first with the game, but he just took over. I mean, he really took off. He really practiced hard, and he learned the game of basketball, and he became one of the great centers. Now, after the 2 consecutive titles, Hakeem Olajuwon's star never shone brighter. He was the best basketball player in the world. Then a guy like then Michael Jordan got together, and let's just say the rest was history. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. But for 2 years, at least 2 years, Hakeem Olajuwon showed the heart of a champion, and he ruled the basketball world.